today we've got something pretty interesting going on. All right, so something that I've been wanting to work on for quite a long time now, pretty much ever since I got the car, was wanting to repair these wheels. So they have a little bit of, there's some curb rash here. You can see some of these have like paint chips, and you know, that's some, actually I think that's something else. Yeah, so curb rash here, curb rash there, paint chips. So that's something that I've been wanting to work on for a little while now. And so in addition to that, you know, once you resurface your wheels, like, you know, once you sand them all down, then you gotta repaint them. So I'm gonna have to end up repainting these wheels anyway. So leave a comment down below on what color you think I'm gonna be painting these wheels. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna have to take the valve stem caps off. So that's sort of the tire pressure monitor system, the whole shebang. So you are going to need an 11 mil socket. I've got it on a little 1/4 inch here. No big deal. So, yeah, and make sure you take the actual cap off first of all, because if you don't do that, then you won't be able to get them off. All right, so it's pretty much as simple as that. You've got your little tire pressure monitor piece with all the little digital whatever. So this goes on the underside of the wheel, and then you put on your little washer, and then you put on your actual top piece. And once that's screwed down tight, then you would take just your little plastic cap and screw it on top. So we're gonna do that for the rest of the wheels. And so at the moment, I'm not like super concerned about making sure that the wheels are really clean or anything, because the fact that I know that I'm gonna be like sanding them down, they're gonna be making some debris anyway. Like there's gonna be, some stuff is gonna be coming off the surface of the wheels. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about like washing them first, which I might do, but it's not something that you have to do. Before you paint them, you absolutely need to make sure that they're spotless or as clean as you can possibly get them. But in order to do what I'm gonna do, I'm not really too concerned about it. Okay, so as far as materials that you're going to need in order to complete this job, I'm using the 11 mil socket on like a 1/4 inch wrench. You're just gonna be using this to take your valve stems off. No big deal. So in order to actually do the repair, you're going to need a couple of different things. 150, a 220, and a 500. So those are the 3 sanding papers that I'm gonna be using. And that's just for like, you know, hand stuff. So those are just the sheets. I've also got an Orbital Sander. So this is just a rigid, no big deal. You don't need one with like this little filter bag. You can get just like a standard one. That's not really too big of a deal. But for this, the papers that I've got are 100, 150, and 220. So in the sheets, I did 150, 220, and 500. And then for the Orbital, I have the 100 grit. So that's gonna be like your roughest, you know, most gritty type of surface. That's gonna do the most damage at any given time. And so I don't have a 500 for the Orbital, but that's okay. So the 500 grit sandpaper is going to be your finishing essentially. So you do the 500, and then you go through and you clean the wheels as best as possible, and then you primer them, and then you paint them. So 500 is gonna be the last thing we use. Okay, so before I just jump straight in with the Orbital Sander and like completely wreck it, I am going to just go with the let's see, the 150 paper around the edges that like actually have like the curb rash wear on them before I jump in with the Orbital Sander, because if you go too harsh with the Orbital Sander, you can cause some damage that you might not necessarily want. So just being a little extra cautious here. I don't want to screw this up. Okay, so making a little bit of progress here, just using the 150 grit on the block. So yeah, you can see that I've like worked down some of this stuff here. I mean, you can see that the paint's missing. So yeah, here's paint, obviously, gray, and then you can see where the paint is like worn off. So yeah, there was a little bit of a bad spot here. So you can see here, there was a bit of a rough patch. So I was thinking that I was going to be able to just use the block and the 150 grit. So, you know, this is smooth and fine, but this section is actually quite a bit worse. So yeah, you can see how rough this whole edge is right here. So that's what I'm going to be working on. If I end up sanding away for a really long time and I'm just, you know, scrubbing with the block and it's taking forever, I might switch over to the Orbital. So I didn't think about this initially, but I definitely do recommend wearing a mask, especially if you're going to be using an Orbital Sander that, you know, you're going to be generating this very fine like metal powder. You definitely don't want to be breathing that in. So a simple mask like this is probably good enough. You know, the more protection you have, the better. So yeah, this first wheel that I've been working on, the rim is starting to look pretty good just using the block with the 150. So I think I'm gonna go with that for the most part, unless something really rough comes up. But you gotta remember that whenever you primer the wheel and then you paint the wheel, some of like the really, really small fine gaps are probably going to fill in anyway. So you don't have to be like ultra precise unless you're trying to make it for like a show car or something, in which case you're probably just buying new wheels, not repairing old ones. But anyway. Okay, so I'm at a point where I'm getting to like some of the more gnarly kinds of scratches here. So I am going to go ahead and switch over to the Orbital, but I don't think I'm gonna use this 100 grit. Like the worst of my like dings and defects, I don't think really warrants me using something as rough as the 100. So I am going to go with the 150 grit, which is the same as what I had been sanding with on the block, but now I'm gonna switch to the Orbital. So we're gonna jump into that, and that is going to make pretty light work of sanding this stuff down. So pretty much once I get the rims all done, then I can go back, like I say the rims, like the rim of the wheel. Once I get the outer rims, like all the actual curb rash on the rim, then I can go through and like get any like little paint chips on the spokes with the block. So I'm gonna jump in, go ahead and toss this on the Orbital, and we'll get to work on it. Not too bad, that's pretty good. So yeah, this, like, it doesn't just rotate, like the actual head also moves in like an elliptical pattern. So this should make pretty light work. So when you're using this, you don't want to push down really hard. I mean, this is a pretty heavy device. So really you can just kind of let this sit on top of the surface and let it run and kind of just let it do the work. You don't have to push down and apply a lot of pressure like to the side of the wheel or to the top to really get the effect off of this. So let's do it. All right, so that definitely was a lot quicker. So yeah, this Orbital Sander is pretty dope. So yeah, I think this rim now is looking pretty good. I actually already went through and got one of the spokes. I'll actually go ahead and show you guys. So I went through and went ahead and like did a little bit of work on this spoke. There was a bit of a scratch, but I only did that with the block. I haven't actually hit that with the Orbital yet, but you can still see there's still a little teeny bit of a divot there. So even though like I got like the main scratch off, there's like still a little bit of an indent. Everything else looks pretty good. I mean, little tiny things like this that literally nobody's ever gonna see. So I think these are parts that I've actually kind of sanded already a little bit. So yeah, I'll probably hit those with the block since they're so small and insignificant. But since this little scratch right here is a little bit deeper, I think I'll probably take the orbital to that just for a sec and see if I can get that nice and smoothed out. But after that, like the actual repair on this wheel will more or less be done. What I'm gonna have to do though is go ahead and go through with like my sheets of sandpaper, get all the sides basically. So I've done everything with the 150 grit up to this point. So what I'm gonna have to do now is take the 220 and go around, and so essentially like you create scratches with the 150 grit, especially with the orbital, because it's rotating so much. The orbital will create scratches on this stuff. So once it's like all of the work is done, like all of the removal is done, and like everything's nice and smooth, then I'll go through with the 220, sand it all down, make sure it's all like, it gets more and more smooth the finer grit you go, like the higher level grit you go. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna go ahead and do the 150 on all 4 wheels and get all like the scratches and the curb rash out, and then come back and like do the more fine grit kind of sanding after that and get them to a good spot. Okay, so I got the second wheel done. So let's see here. Let's take a look. So yeah, with this one, and what I think I might actually go back and do with the other one is I just took the orbital and I went all the way around. Let's switch over here. I just went all the way around and I got the entire like flat lip. Pretty much the whole entire thing. I went ahead and just sanded all of that flat. And then this next piece right here is on a little bit, it's like a 45-degree angle. So I went around and did that whole 45-degree angle around the entire thing. And then some of the spokes had, you know, like you had seen on the other one, had some scratches and divots, and some of them even had them like on the sides like this. So, yeah, I might actually end up going back and sort of redoing the first one that I did to make sure that it's just as good as this one. But I am pretty happy with that. So that's kind of gonna be my thought process going forward, is making sure I get this flat lip first, then go through with this angle, and then if I need to, getting this like actual side, like nice and vertical all the way around, and then go through with the orbital and hit the spokes. To be honest, when I first started with the orbital, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, this is just gonna remove a lot of stuff really fast, but because I'm not using that 100 grit, it's not pulling off too much too quickly. So that's kind of nice for me, just sort of peace of mind. I'm not gonna like, by trying to flatten or level out the metal surface of the wheels, accidentally like gouge a big chunk out of it and then have to try and fix that. So yeah, just starting with the 150 for me is a little bit more comfortable, but if you've got big like deep scratches and you need to like flatten a large surface, then you may need to start with the 100 grit or maybe even lower than that. So yeah, I might end up going back and redoing that first one, but I'm gonna go ahead and get the third and fourth ones done, see how I feel about it, and we'll go from there. All right, so I have finished the third and fourth wheels. They are looking pretty solid. So yeah, what I ended up doing, where I just went all the way around that top surface of the rim and like got that whole surface, and then went on the angle and got that like 45-degree all the way around. I really like how that sort of came out. So I'm gonna go back and do that on the very first one that I did when I was like not sure. I was doing the whole thing like with the sanding block. Now that I'm more comfortable with the orbital, I'm gonna go ahead and redo that first one that I did. Masks and glasses, am I right? All right, so, okay. All of the repair work, more or less, is done now. my hands are a little bit numb from holding onto that orbital. All of the repair is done. Now I essentially just need to go through and finish like conditioning everything. So more or less what I plan to do is just keep using the orbital as long as I can. So just because it does so much work so much faster than me just like using the block to like sand things down manually. So I'm gonna take those, one second, I'm right here. I'm gonna take the 220 grit, toss this on the orbital, and basically do, now I'm not just gonna be doing like the rims, like the rim of the wheel and the spokes of the wheel that actually need repair. At this point, I'm gonna actually start like sanding the entire face, like all of the sides of the spokes, like the flat spots up here, down into the barrel, down where the lug nuts go in. Because all of that has to be painted as well, so all of that has to be sanded and prepped, essentially. So, I'm gonna get to that. All right, at this point, I have exhausted everything that I can complete, essentially, with the Orbital Sander. So, the point that I'm at, rest this on my toes, I don't damage it anymore. The point that I'm at, I've used the orbital with up to the 220 grit all the way around the rim, and that's already feeling pretty nice and smooth, just to like, you know, to my fingers here. That already feels pretty dang good. Now, what I'm gonna do, so I use the orbital also on the top surfaces of each of these spokes. The sander is too big for me to be able to get in and do any of the sides of these. So, I'm gonna get my sanding block and the 220 grit sandpaper and start to go to town on the sides and try to get in these crevices and then get down in here and inside of the lug nut holes. Once we do that, we'll pretty much be done and ready to paint. So, okay, so the sanding block is not gonna work. There's too many little tight crevices, so we're just gonna do it by hand. Okay, so it is the next day, actually. I got called into work around 4 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday and pretty much worked overnight until about 4:30 in the morning. So jumping back into this, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon. These two wheels are done all the way up to the 220 grit. This was the one that I was working on yesterday with 220. And I have to sort of remember where I was. I'm pretty sure I remember like where I was in terms of progress. And then the fourth one I have not done with 220 at all. So we're gonna get the 220 done, and then I'm gonna go and follow up the whole thing, all 4 wheels again, with the 500 grit. Lots of sanding, lots of prep work, but these things are gonna look sweet when they're done. So let's go ahead and get right back into it. So the reason that these wheels are so tedious to do this sanding is that, you know, the spokes are not necessarily difficult to do. I mean, the tops and the sides, you know, you can kind of wrap the sandpaper around your finger at some point in order to get into these little crevices. That's not too bad. But these little lips, this is the hard part. Getting inside here along this edge, the bottom, the flat part here, and then all of the vertical spot up here. You want to try and get as good of coverage and as even sanding on the whole thing as possible. But it's a lot of work, but you know, it's a labor of love. Like you've gotta enjoy doing this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it's not worth it. So yeah, keep that vision of what they're gonna look like when they're done, and that'll help you keep pushing forward. This is gonna kill me. We'll just have a seat here. Oh. I'm done with the 220 pretty much all around. Do I want to do the 500 grit? No. Am I going to do the 500 grit? Probably. This is taking forever. Oh God, my back hurts. Oh, I'm getting old. All right. Oh, okay. So, recap. Start with the Orbital Sander with a 80 grit or a 100 grit, something low, nice and rough. Oh, take off all the big scratches and such. Then come through with the 200 or a 220 in my case. Come through and kind of clean up all of the divots and the nicks and scratches and things like that. And then come through with something higher grit, 400 or 500. And that should get you to where you want to be. So the only thing left to do at this point is to get the wheels cleaned up. I've got to take off the paper, like the adhesive underneath where the wheel weights were. I still got to get that off, so I'll pull that off, get them cleaned, and then they're pretty much ready to go. Ready to prime, paint, clear coat. So that's going to be, the next video is going to be paint. Drop a comment down below what color you think I'm going to paint these. If you found this video helpful, leave it a like. Please do subscribe, leave a comment down below, and see you guys in the next one.